Welcome, everyone, at the second installment of the Fellow Talks podcast series. During these discussions, you get to know a new generation of the Budapest Fellowship Program conducted by the Hungary Foundation and the Mathias Corvinus Collegium. Our next fellow grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and has gained an in-depth knowledge in policy and governance challenges throughout his career. Please welcome Tom Pearson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tom's main research area is energy security and energy policy in Hungary and in the region. And my first question for you, Tom, would be if you could share your motivation behind coming to Hungary in the first place, and why is this subject the one you're researching? What got you interested in this in the first place?
Thank you. So I first came to Hungary in the summer of 2003 to take some law school classes at ELTA. And I really fell in love with the place, the people, the food, the wine, the culture, just beautiful and incredible. So I was motivated to return to Hungary. As far as my research agenda, I had done energy policy as well as tech and telecommunications policy at a couple of think tanks in DC. Early in my career, so it was kind of a return to the policy world, although I've dipped in and out over the years. And I was also very attracted by the opportunity to teach. Teaching and research are two of my favorite things to do, so I was very happy to have that opportunity as well.
Before you came to Hungary, you actually spent quite a significant time in the Far East in Cambodia. And what are the best practices, either in the workplace or the academia, that you have learned there? And what are these best practices that you would also like to utilize here in Hungary during your work here or during your practices here?
I guess the best thing about working in Cambodia was the people, as it usually is anywhere that you work, but kind of a culture of avoiding conflict, I guess, which has its definite drawbacks. Sometimes you need to address conflicts head on, but I find a lot of times in workplaces in the U.S. especially, like people have conflicts for no reason at all. So it was kind of nice to be in an environment, although again, there are drawbacks to that approach as well, to look at avoiding conflict and kind of finding better ways to address them instead of, maybe screaming at people. So, yeah. And as far as the academic environment, I think the classroom environment in Cambodia is very open. I certainly didn't ever feel like, I was expected to hold one view or the other. My goal, as it always is to challenge students to think for themselves. And I think, at least from the headlines, that kind of academic freedom seems to be getting rarer these days. So I've heard from friends of mine in the U.S. who are professors on the left and the right that there's not a lot of opportunity to kind of engage in that sort of open academic debate these days. So I guess that would be some of the takeaways. But it's hard to transplant things from one society to another. I find that every culture and society kind of have their own unique ways of doing things, and those things tend to work well, although there are always issues, but they tend to work well within that particular context. But it's hard to take something from one context and transplant it to another successfully. So I would also be hesitant about prescribing particular ideas to another culture or society.
No, I definitely get you. Okay, I take it. But now that you have spent here almost 5 to 6 months here in Hungary, I must ask you what our work environment is like. what do you see? What are strengths and weaknesses? Or what is your experience with being here in Hungary?
Well, I mean, I've had a very good experience. I don't think that 5 to 6 months makes me an expert, but I have certainly been welcomed here, and I've had very good relationships with my colleagues, both at the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade, which is where I'm doing my policy research, and as well as at MCC and associated programs, teaching. And just engaging with people has been great. It's very open, very kind, and I've had a good experience so far. So.
How much Hungarian have you managed to master so far?
Kicsi magyarul beszélek.
Excellent, excellent. That's great. Going to your research subject, I think the last year has been revolving around energy security. Everyone tried to get a grasp of the subject, but Hungary is in a special position in many senses. But I would really be interested in seeing your assessment on how do you think Hungary managed to tackle the subject of energy diversification? And obviously, coming from a US point of view, what do you think? What role can the US play in easing the burdens of Hungary?
I think I'll take the second part first. The US has been, in the last few years, investing in the region in energy, especially nuclear power. There are projects in Poland and Czechia. The projects in Czechia are especially exciting because they are involving small modular reactors, which are kind of the next, potentially the next big thing. The technology is proven, but it remains to be seen whether or not they'll be commercially viable, which is largely contingent on how they're regulated. So there has been some policy improvements in the United States and also in the region as far as adapting to new nuclear technologies. So I think that's a very positive thing. And again, these projects are happening in the region. The U.S. is facilitating investment by U.S. energy corporations here. So I think that with Hungary, it's a little bit different just because there are long-term contracts with Rosatom, and it looks like the Paks 2 project is going forward. So I think it's beyond my area of expertise to think about how the U.S. might be able to help, but I do think the U.S. is active in the region, and if there could be more geopolitical agreement between Hungary and the United States about energy investments, I think that would be a fantastic thing. But I think it's the Ukraine war situation makes it all very difficult at the moment. So as far as Hungary's prospects, I think a lot of the things that a lot of the policies are great, like digitalization of the grids in Hungary and upgrading grids so that once again home solar panels can contribute energy to the grid. I mean, I think the short term, there's still going to be a lot of short term pain because of the Ukraine war. Although the Ukraine war was not the first cause of the energy crisis here in Hungary or in Europe more broadly, prices were high in 2021 ahead of the Russian invasion. So, but the Ukraine war has certainly exacerbated the energy crisis in the region and in Europe more broadly. So I think what the U.S. could do in the short term is reform its nuclear regulations more. They've taken some steps to do that, but there needs to be more room for innovation in nuclear policy in the United States, which I think would have reverberations around the world. And also, natural gas is the cleanest of the fossil fuels. Some countries in Europe are going back to coal now, which is the dirtiest of the fossil fuels. So I think if the U.S. really invested in gas and increased gas supplies, especially with the pinch in gas supplies due to the weaponization of energy by Vladimir Putin, I think that would go a long way in the medium term to helping Hungary and other countries in the region have a much more stable supply and manage the cost of gas in the medium term. And longer term, I think scaling up nuclear as well as renewables is the best way forward. I don't like to see government setting specific or investing in specific technologies. I'd rather see government setting targets for here's kind of what we want to achieve and letting the market sort out how we're going to get there. So there's a lot going on in this field, and so there's so many different seemingly competing needs like climate change and affordable energy. So I think Hungary is in a pretty good position, but there are steps that the U.S. could take in the short to medium term, and in the longer term, just kind of being more open to nuclear power, especially modular reactors, and also not demonizing the cleanest of fossil fuels. So I think we're going to have to use fossil fuels for many more decades, and so the best way to meet climate goals while providing affordable energy, one of the best ways to do that is to focus on the cleanest fossil form of energy, which is gas, and also not demonize nuclear. We're presented with the idea that, and it could be, true. I'm not an expert on climate change, but if it is an existential crisis, then you need to employ all of the resources and all of the people that you can to fight it. So it's making oil or gas the enemy here, and making nuclear, especially the energy. Nuclear is a carbon-free, essentially, form of energy. So I don't understand the antipathy towards nuclear power that seems to dominate a lot of rhetoric these days. But yeah, I think short term there's going to be a lot of pain. Medium term, it will get better, and then long term, I think we're going to be okay, including on the climate change front. But it's a matter of how we're going to get there.
That was descriptive, I must say. I really enjoyed these talks with you because this is a subject where I would really like to develop my knowledge, and I think I have a lot of catching up to do. But that's why I love these discussions. You are here to learn. I would go a bit more personal now. And in the previous installment, when I could have a conversation with Logan, I asked him about the similarities and the differences he sees between the US and Hungary. In particular, you have seen towns and cities, read our literature, seen our movies, a plentitude of them. What would you say? What are characteristic features that we share with the US? And what is a specific or a particular Hungarian phenomenon?
Well, it's hard for me to make generalizations, I guess, because everyone's an individual. So there are I do think that there are shared cultural characteristics across individuals, but not everybody in the society is going to be this way or the other. And I think if you ask people from the U.S. and people from Hungary, the more people you ask, like what's stereotypically American or what's stereotypically Hungarian, I think you get very different answers depending on whom you ask. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as some common characteristics, you'd see like, people are caring and kind in general. I think if you take the average Hungarian and the average American and you present them with an opportunity to be kind to a stranger, they will happily do that. But and I think maybe there's a much more of a joie de vivre here in Hungary. People seem to embrace life a little bit more with like just kind of the care that goes into food and winemaking and things like that. So I think that there are strong cultural currents that kind of point towards the enjoyment of life. And let's see. It's hard to kind of compare and contrast. I can't think of any super strong differences at the moment. But yeah, I think both countries have their strengths, and I really wouldn't comment on the drawbacks. But I think both countries have their strengths, and it's difficult for me to kind of assess an entire society, I guess.
Okay, then let's take it. No, I completely get it. One thing that came to my mind is let's hope it will get out some interesting pieces of information. Living in a Hungarian city, how does it make you feel different from Phnom Penh, Cambodia, or for example in DC? Because I was in DC already, but I didn't get to go to Cambodia yet. Hope, but maybe in the future. What are the differences you see in the Hungarian city? Either the structure the city is built up. What is life like here in comparison to the other places?
Sure, yeah. Hungary or Budapest and Hungary are much colder than Phnom Penh and Cambodia, so the weather is drastically different. So I think in DC, just because it is the capital of the U.S., and this is where all the political and governance bodies, or the national ones, reside. So you get a lot of people in the district and surrounding areas that are focused on the political process. So there's a lot of talk of politics and partisan politics, and that can get a little bit tiresome after a while. It certainly did for me. So I needed to remove myself from that kind of environment. Although DC is great. Like, I really enjoyed living there. But after a while, I was just like, I don't, really want to get involved in all these disputes over politics. So Phnom Penh is sprawling, kind of semi-chaotic, I guess, and an amazing place as well. And the people there are very friendly and warm in general. And I would say the contrast with Budapest is that it's much easier to get around in Budapest because the transport infrastructure is much better. Getting from one side of Phnom Penh to the other could take a long time. So it's like if your friends invite you out to a place that's, too far from your house, which is like 20 minutes, you're like, I'm not going to meet you there. It's fine. But I think here the transport and it seems like the city, I know it's a very large city, but it seems much more compact and just kind of very navigable. The people here are friendly too, but I find you have to make, in general, much more of an effort. But if you do make the effort, people warm up very quickly. So I find that just with strangers on the street and then other people you meet. So yeah, I think a person can be at home in any of these places and find great relationships and warm people in all of these places. But yeah, it just depends. To me, it depends on how tolerant you are of cold or hot weather. I think would be
You've
the
seen both
main
extremes at this point.
Yeah.
And as we are already halfway through the program, what is one thing that you want to experience here in Hungary yet? Anything for the future in terms of, is there a city you would like to see? Is there something that you would like to understand a bit more about Hungary? Because 10 months, it's not a long period, but it's long enough so that you can get a grasp of what this country is about. And especially with this program where you get to see the history, the culture, the legal background, and you name it. What is one thing that you have yet to reveal or uncover about Hungary?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could spend a lifetime here and still be a novice. But I guess I would just like to see, and we've had, great opportunities to travel around the country and see life outside of Budapest.
Oh, yes.
So I think I would like to just travel to more places in Hungary and kind of just experience the life there, however briefly. And I'm excited about the trip to Hungarian populations outside of Hungary as well, because that I think will be a very interesting perspective for people who, were separated from their country, not of their own choosing, right? So, I'm very much looking forward to that trip. I think just what remains to be seen is just meeting more Hungarians and just understanding what their lives are like to the extent that I can. I don't know that there's a key that I think I will find at some point, because I think understanding a place is very difficult. I spent 8 years in Cambodia, and I wouldn't claim to understand it. Like I kind of know how things work there, but in maybe the curse and the blessing of the expat life is that no matter how familiar you get with a place, in some sense, you will always be an outsider, right? So, and I feel like an outsider sometimes in my own hometowns as well. So it's kind of it's just difficult to pin down what makes a place, even if you grow up there, but especially if you don't.
Well, I hope that you will feel Hungary is more and more your home, even for this short while.
I've definitely been made to feel at home here, and I've appreciated that aspect of being here very much.
No, it's always a pleasure to have you here, Tom. And I think we've concluded the discussion. So thank you very much for coming here, and I hope to hear about you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, Vincent.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the second installment of the Fellow Talks of the Budapest Fellowship Program. I was Bence Szabó, Program Associate of the Hungary Foundation and International Relations student at the Mathias Corvinus Collegium. And see you next time.